Hi, this is Raquel with Paints and Glitter, and today I'm going to show you how to make this adorable canvas using a napkin and a few other materials. First, what I did was I did apply white acrylic paint onto a small canvas, as you can see. It was quite easy. I just covered the entire canvas with that white acrylic paint. I then separated the napkin from its white backing that you see there, and you can save that backing for another project. I just took that uppermost layer of that napkin and I laid it right on top of the canvas. And as you see there, all I did was smooth it out with my hands very gently. You want to do this nice and soft. It'll take you a little bit of time to just go ahead and apply that little napkin onto the canvas. This is a smaller canvas, by the way. And then I just rubbed it in. The water content in that acrylic paint is enough to go ahead and help that napkin adhere to it. I did press it on every side of the canvas because I did apply acrylic paint all the way to the sides and the back of that canvas. And as you can tell, just using my fingertips, I went ahead and pressed that napkin onto the canvas, and it looks faster here on the video, but I was quite gentle with it. And then I just started ripping away the part of the napkin that I was not going to need, pulling it away from the canvas. Whenever you wet a napkin, it's easier to rip it, of course. And this is not something that needs to look absolutely perfect. And as you can tell, I also use my paintbrush to apply pressure to that napkin, and it allowed me to rip it away. And then I went ahead and added another coat of white acrylic paint on the edges and on the back of that canvas. Now, it's not absolutely necessary that you do this with white paint, but it worked for the look that I wanted. Now, as you can tell there, I also used a medium by Martha Stewart, and any decoupage medium will work for this technique. What I did also was that I reserved a piece of just a card that came in the mail. It's basically like a credit card, and I used that to spread that medium evenly as a very, very thin coat on that canvas. And here you see, of course, I'm going a little faster because of the video, but you can take your time with this as well and just be very gentle with it as you're spreading that all across the canvas, and that'll give you a really nice smooth texture on that without having to apply too much of it. I also used my heat gun just gently to go over that and help it to begin drying. However, I didn't dry it completely with that heat gun. I set it aside, and while I was waiting for that canvas to dry completely, I gathered my Martha Stewart stamps that are called cherry blossoms or blossoms. I put them on my Tim Holtz stamp platform, and then I just grabbed a few types of ink here that I thought would work with this project, and they are Distress and Oxide inks by Ranger. As you can tell there, I grabbed a few different pinks that I thought would go well, and I have a 110-pound cardstock that I stamped those flowers and branches on, and I just went ahead and just stamped on this entire piece of 8.5 by 11 piece of paper because I wanted to have plenty of blossoms to choose from. You'll see later on I don't use every single one of them, but it just gave me some options, and I wanted to make sure that I had colors that I thought would look really nice against that background. So here I just stamp it again, and some of the blossoms were going to overlap, so I had to remove them. And then the great thing about this is, of course, that you can stamp multiple times to get the look that you want. Now you're going to see that some of these flowers are variegated and not entirely solid, but you'll see later how, because they are stamped with oxide inks and with distress inks, that's not going to be a problem, because when you apply water to this type of ink, it does react, and even if it looks splotchy now, that's not going to be a problem for me later. And you'll see at the end of the video the difference between what you see here and what it'll end up looking like. Now I did use some Spellbinders dies because I wanted some decorative elements on the edges or the corners of this canvas. And as you can tell, what's great about these dies, of course, is that you can layer them on your die cuts. And I had already embossed them as well as cut them, of course. And that raised layer that the die cut allows you to have when you emboss it is really great also for inking. So I did use my Tattered Rose ink there, and I lightly inked those pieces. And then I also went ahead and colored in the other element of this canvas, which was the wreath by Tonic Studios that I cut out. And I used some Spectrum Noir markers as well as some Nouveau markers just to add some colors that would also play well with the colors in the napkin. So I used some light greens, and then I also used some pinks. This was very simple. It was just a matter of adding colors that looked similar to the colors in the napkin. And I wanted it to look a bit like a watercolor effect also. I did cut that out of 110-pound cardstock, and then I went ahead and added the same colors of oxides that I used for the flowers that I had stamped earlier and the twigs. And as you can tell there, I used a water brush to complete the look of this. And that's what's so wonderful about oxide inks also, is that you can layer them on top of your alcohol inks, and it doesn't ruin what you've created. It just overlaps, it layers nicely, and it has almost like a watercolor effect also, depending on how much water, of course, you add to it. So that is a wonderful and versatile ink, and I always highly recommend it. I went ahead and just kept adding colors. I kept adding layers of it, whether it be with oxides or the alcohol inks. And I just completed the little edges there, of course, with the greens. And just the colors that I knew would complement this nicely. So I was asked where I get my inspiration from for these types of projects. And I do appreciate the question. I just wanted to let you guys know that I live in apple country in upstate New York, so we have a lot of trees, a lot of foliage, and I love seeing the different colors. And so yeah, that and the cherry blossom trees in Washington is where I got my inspiration for the colors and all of that. Now here I wanted to share with you guys, I did initially think that I was going to use this in a vertical perspective. I thought that I was going to make this canvas in the direction that you see here, and I did later change my mind, but there you see how I was planning how this would look, and according to that is how I was layering all of the pieces. However, I changed my mind, but in any case, on this part here, what you're seeing is how I laid my piece from the Spellbinders die set right on top of that wreath. Now, I knew that I was not going to use the moth element. I was going to cover that up. I only wanted the branches and the flowers, so I just laid that bigger piece of paper or that die cut on top. I adhered it, as you saw, and then I started snipping away the pieces that would show through that pretty decorative element. And then I took some paper here by oh goodness, I forget the name of it, but I'll put it in the description box. It's made by Glad, and I apologize, the name of it escapes me, but this is a technique I learned from Jennifer McGuire to pick up a lot of bits and pieces of paper, and that way you can apply adhesive to the back of it. So I'm applying art glitter glue to this here, and press and seal is the name. It just came to me. The press and seal is the name of this this paper or see-through paper that you're seeing in the background. So what I did was that once I applied the adhesive to my paper, I then applied the backing that I had cut out by just tracing the die onto a piece of white paper, and that way I was able to adhere that and peel away that backing, and then just fill in the little elements there. And what you don't see is that I did cut away some of what was overlapping on the edges. In other words, what was peeking through with that white paper, whatever I didn't like, I just cut away. And now you see how I changed the perspective of the canvas, and I laid that wreath on top of the white piece of paper, but I only adhered a tiny little bit of it so that you could slip a picture behind there. And the rest of this project was just a matter of laying down different flowers that I had previously stamped, as you saw. I cut them out and I fussy cut them. I later inked the edges a little bit more here and there, and now it was just a matter of laying down those flowers, making sure that I had little groupings here and there, and some of them, as you can tell, I did manipulate so that way they wouldn't be completely flat. I just bent them with my fingernails, and I just started grouping them and layering them and adhering them here and there. And this is also where you'll see that because of the coloring, that splotchy coloring there, I was able to actually use a water brush, and I'm not sure if I have that still in the video because I did edit this video, but I used my little water brush and I was able to just ink here and there and add some mixed media to this canvas so that way those little flowers would still look nice. And it does have that watercolor effect also, so it didn't bother me that they weren't completely solid. I just picked the parts of the flower that I wanted to see, and if there was something that I didn't particularly love, then I just layered another flower on top of it. But you can see there that I did group the larger flowers first, and then I started adding the smaller ones around it, as well as those little branches that add just a pop of color and dimension here and there. And I just really like that stamp set. I also use my favorite pen, as you can see here, and that is a Sakura Jelly Roll pen. And it just adds a little bit of glimmer, and it's not noticeable immediately, but when the light hits this, then it adds that little bit of shine. And this is not in a particular color. This is the one that's kind of, I guess, clear, you would call it, but it's called Starburst or something like that. And I went through with every single little flower because for me, it's all about the details. I did use that as if it were a highlight, and so I made sure that I went over those pieces in the corners as well, and then I finished everything off with little dots of Nouveau drops in different colors of pink that I also thought would go well with this canvas. And I did add the missing piece off to the right that you don't see there. At the very end, I did cut out one more piece to make sure that this frame was complete, but this was a lot of fun to make. I want to say thank you again to Vicki, who is TryHeart67, for being generous enough to supply the napkins, and I hope that this has been helpful to you, that you've been inspired, and be blessed. Bye-bye.